All right, today we are dealing with the information theory. A lot of people will talk about knowledge and what is knowledge. To some people, knowledge is the key to opening their future. If you talk to families who've never had anyone go through college and they finally have their first college graduate, and those individuals are typically so very proud of that student. I was just talking to someone today who's in charge of hiring individuals at a fairly large corporation, and her comment was, "Oh, Angela, if students understood how important a college degree is." She said, "I had an opening, and there was a woman who came in. It was obvious that she had the knowledge to do the accounting that was necessary, but unfortunately, this woman had never obtained a college degree, and so it greatly hindered her." And she said, "Quite frankly, I had to stop the process of interviewing this gal because our company's uh, um, decision has been that I cannot hire anybody unless they have a college degree." So, college degree can help with knowledge, and sometimes knowledge comes in various means, doesn't it? It doesn't always necessarily come from a book. How do I say that? Well, I think we have to recognize uh, that there are different ways we can get our knowledge. This is just kind of a one that you're probably very familiar with, the Lion King. But in this situation right here, uh, the monkey is talking to Simba, and Simba is saying, "Look, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back because I know I'm supposed to be king, but my past is painful, and I have no desire to go back there." And so Rafiki, if you recall, pulls out his stick and kind of whacks him on the head. And Simba says, "Hey, what did you do that for?" And the monkey says, "It doesn't matter. It's in the past, and you just told me the past doesn't matter." Then the monkey begins to swing again and hit the lion, and the lion the second time ducks and questions the monkey, "Why did you do that?" Rafiki says, "Well, because you learned from your past, and the second time you ducked." So experiences can sometimes be the master teacher for us. With that in mind, then, we want to look at the different ways, different types of knowledge that we can gain. One is through learning, through the participation. It is when we do things that we gain this knowledge. For example, riding a bike. I could read to you about how to ride a bike, and I could talk about the theories of riding a bike, but it's really you getting on your bicycle and trying it and falling down and skinning your knee. It's through that experience that you learn. Same thing as creating a blog. You might understand aspects of it, you may realize things about it, but when you get your hands on experience, you will gain much knowledge. Same thing with making your favorite recipe. That is knowledge by experience. There's also knowledge gained by authority. In other words, I did not participate in it, I didn't have a hands on experience, but I did take someone's word for it. For example, how many were slain in an African civil war? Well, I wasn't there. I was not participating in it, but I can pick up firsthand accounts and I can read about it. And I will be willing to take the authority, the word of someone who was there, who experienced it, and who had a better understanding of it. There are times when I'm reading the scripture where perhaps a passage is somewhat unclear to me, and so I will go to a book, I will go to a commentary, I will read about it, and I'm willing to, as I trust that individual, as I trust that authority, I'm willing to gain knowledge that way. So, again, the two ways that we can gain knowledge are through experience and through the authority of someone else. Now, what is a theory? Because we're going to spend our lecture times discussing theories. So I need you to go ahead and write this down. Understand and recognize, please, that a theory is nothing more than a statement that predicts or explains how certain phenomena are related to one another. Again, a theory is a statement that predicts or explains how certain phenomena are related to one another. Again, this is a statement that explains. A theory is different from a law. If you go back to your scientific studies, You've got laws of gravity, right? That is for sure something that's going to happen. What goes up comes down because gravity has that pull. A theory is not a law. It's not set in stone. With theories with which Mrs. Morris chooses to disagree. For example, the Big Bang Theory. I don't believe that these amazing uh, bodies that we live in just happened because there was an explosion or an implosion of atoms. I believe there was a designer, there was a creator. As well, we've got theories of natural selection, which says that theorizes that humans gradually. Again, I disagree with that. I believe in Genesis 1:1 that says, in the beginning, God created. Now, moving on, why do we want to study theories? Why does it matter? Because in our field of communications, we want to be able to make generalizations about the way people communicate. And when we can make those generalizations, a couple things will happen. We will learn to be better communicators, and when we're better communicators, we'll learn better how to hopefully anticipate our audience, understand our audience, and thus have the clearest message possible. So today, again, in review, we talked yesterday, or last time rather, we've got the source, which is the originator of the communication, and the source provides the message or the content through a channel. That's our means of carrying the communication. It can be internet, it can be print, it can be in a book, it can be in a magazine, and then it goes to the receiver. Remember the responsive, oops, sorry about that. The responses of the receiver back to the source are called feedback. Feedback are a very crucial aspect of communications. Now, today we're going to be talking and dealing with the information theory. Information. Now, before you write too much, just recognize this statement right here, that in the information theory, the term information is used in a special sense. It is a measure of the freedom of choice with which a message is selected from the set of all possible messages. So, what do we mean there? We say, whew, that sounds like a lot and it's confusing. Not really. Understand that information theory is really about the process of getting the content to the receiver. Now, go ahead and write this down. It is associated strongly with these two individuals, Warren Weaver and Claude Shannon. I do want you to go ahead and note we're going to always write down the people who are highly known for specific theories. The reason is we're going to have to very, very quickly cover all these theories. My goal is just to whet your appetite. Hopefully you'll say, that was so fascinating, I want to go back and study more. So if you can know information theory, you can know it's associated with Warren Weaver and Claude Shannon, then you might be able to go do some research on your own so that you can get a stronger understanding of this. Okay? But what are some things that we need to recognize then about the information theory itself? Well, to note this, that it's not so much related to what you did say as to what you could have said. Then, just kind of a review, the information becomes the measure of our mind's ability to translate the information. Understand this, that Warren Weaver was a mathematician. He went to MIT, and he used all these number crunching skills and started analyzing communication with it. And it's absolutely fascinating. So again, the information theory is not so much what you said as what you could have said, and then based on what you could have said as well as what you did said, how clear did this message come through to your audience? Now, this is Warren Weaver's model. Last time we talked about 3 models. You'll note this tends to be a fairly linear model, does it not? If you look back at your notes and you remember the linear model was just a straight across one, Warren Weaver, in his mathematical mindset, said, you've got your information and your transmitter. We now have started calling that your channel, right? Then he says that sends across to the receiver. We're going straight across. And then the receiver will decode and get a final message. And what Warren Weaver was really interested in right here was the noise. Now, his noise was not physical at all. It would not be a car driving by outside. It would not be a band that began playing. Warren Weaver really just concentrated on the mental noise and the noise really of the receiver. Okay, so you need to note that. Again, it's his mathematical construct that's coming here, and his saying that noise impacts the understandability of the message itself. Couple key aspects that I want you to understand of the information theory. First of all is what he labeled entropy. Entropy is the uncertainty or the disorganization of the communication. I'll say this, you go ahead and write, okay? So entropy is the uncertainty or the disorganization. And according to Warren Weaver, the greater the information in the message, the lower the randomness, lower the noise, and hence the smaller the entropy. And if entropy is the uncertainty or disorganization, again, Warren Weaver is saying, how can we analyze the communication process so that we reduce the uncertainty? And the entropy is the uncertainty. Righty? For example, if you say to your friend, hey, are you going to go to dinner at McDonald's or at Applebee's? And your friend says, yes. What are you left understanding? We've got cognitive dissonance. I don't know if my friend is going to Applebee's based on the response that was given to me. So again, with the information theory, first of all, we've got the entropy. That's the uncertainty, the randomness. Then the second aspect that Warren Weaver really wanted us to recognize was redundancy. Now, it wasn't the redundancy necessarily of saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. That's not it at all. He analyzed redundancy as the measure of certainty, predictability. In other words, how can the communicator improve the overall reliability of the message so no questions remain? Right? So redundancy, you want to reduce the redundancy is how you measure predictability. So that there are no questions in the mind of the listener. Now take yourself back to a setting where perhaps someone is standing in front of 500 people. Well, let me change that. First of all, let's say that we're a classroom setting and I have 15 students there and I'm teaching away and a student raises a hand and there's the feedback and that there's a question of some kind. I call on my student and I'm able to answer. But as the size of the group grows, the formality of the message grows, does it not? And so I cannot look over 500, a sea of 500, and answer every single question of every single hand that is raised. Therefore, the burden is on my shoulders that I communicate effectively, that I communicate well, so that I reduce the number of questions. It doesn't mean I can completely eliminate them, but I attempt to reduce them. Now again, we said that Warren Weaver was a mathematician. So of course he's going to put his linear model and he's going to have a mathematical problem solving here. And here's what he said. All right, if a source uses 70% of its freedom of choice, okay, the words that it chooses, the method it chooses to get it across, it has, 100% freedom, but there are certain things that are necessary. For example, grammar becomes a necessary. We need to put things in certain constructs. So if they use 70% of their freedom, they have a relative entropy of 7.7. Then redundancy, you just automatically think redundancy starts at 100%. Then you would reduce that number by the number of the relative entropy. In this case, then, you've got 100 minus 70, which equals 30. Okay, so that is, and I want you to know that come quiz and test time. So how would Warren Weaver try to get this across? He says we've got our choice of how we put something together. Then we subtract the relative entropy, and that's the amount of redundancy that we have. Now, it's really important that you understand that with information theory is not in any way dealing with content being good or bad, content being moral or amoral. Weaver was really focusing on the measurability of getting a message across in the clearest fashion so that there are no questions in the minds of the listener. Make sense to you? So he says it's not that we just have to repeat something over and over and over and over and over again in order to get it through. Why? Because repeated information has to be credible, it has to be useful, or the listener's just going to consider it a waste of time. And if the listener begins to consider it a waste of time, the listener will stop listening. All right, there'll be that self-talk in there. And the listener will say, man, this is getting old. Have you ever talked to somebody? Have you ever been in communication with someone? Have you ever listened to someone and they repeated themselves so much that you began thinking, I've heard that, I've heard that, I've heard that, and you turn it off. There's nothing wrong with a communicator repeating his or her main ideas. It's wise in the introduction to give us a preview of the content. And then it's wise within the speech itself to give us very clear signposts. First, I will discuss. Next, I will discuss. Finally, I will discuss. But it's not necessary to repeat yourself over and over again with no new content and thus bore your listener. Right? So again, with information theory, recognize the greater the information in the message, the lower its randomness. If you are too rapid, if you are too brief, then there is the huge possibility that the randomness of the message is going to be inflated because the noise, the misunderstanding of the listener, is heightened. Okay, so when you give a speech, even if your speech can only be 5 minutes long, that's when it's crucial that you learn good editing skills so that you put all the information in there that's necessary, remove that which is not necessary, and then you leave a very concise, powerful, poignant statement. The same is true when you're editing written things. If you're editing for your blog or you're editing for your web page, more does not equal better. More just equals more. Right? So learn to analyze communication situations. We've got situations like this. We might have, you're looking at or listening to a situation, say who, saying what, via what channel, to whom are they saying that? In other words, who is their listener? And then what were the effects? I want you to take a minute and write those 5 things down. Who says what, in what channel, to whom are they saying it, and what were the ultimate effects? All right, so if we're analyzing a communication situation and we ask ourselves that, then with the information theory we can say, were there questions? Was there redundancy? Was there entropy? Was the message unclear? Historically, does the name Joe Wilson mean anything to you? He created quite a stir when he made the statement, "You lie." Now, does anybody remember what that was all about? Alrighty, if you want to, go Google this because you can find this actual interaction between Representative Joe Wilson and the President, Barack Obama, when the President was giving a Union speech. And as the President was speaking, Joe Wilson says, "You lie." Now, it's fascinating for me to analyze that because as you watch State of the Unions, you see the president, and then behind him you see the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and then you see on his other side the vice president. That's always the setup. If you go Google that, go YouTube it, and then do it without any volume the first time, and you can tell by their nonverbal cues that Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Biden are very, very disturbed by what had happened. Then, if you turn the volume on, the president is speaking, and then all of a sudden in the distance you can hear somebody say, "You lie." Now, whether or not I agree with the president's policies, I don't think that the representative did the right thing at that time to burst out in such a way. Okay, so I don't use that as an example of a wise way to try to communicate with the president. But I don't think there is any redundancy. Nobody questioned the message of Joe Wilson. He was strongly discouraged from doing that. His fellow Republicans really scolded him for what he did, but everybody understood the message. So according to the information theory, wow, that was very clear. Okay, the message itself was clear. Again, we're not dealing with content, and we're not dealing with situation. We're saying, do we reduce any kind of redundancy there? So here's what I'd like you to do. Just thinking through the situation. I'd like you to go online. It shouldn't take you too long. I want you to find 2 different articles that deal with the oil spill that's current. Okay, and I want you to analyze those 2 differing articles regarding the BP's response. That's specifically what I'm after, their response. Then I just want you to, very briefly, who was it? Who was the person in the article? Who was the author? What are they saying? Was the BP response good? Was it bad? What channel did they use this? Did you find this online? Did you find it in a magazine? Did you find it in a newspaper? To whom? In other words, does this specific communicator tend to have a key audience? For example, if it was something you saw on Fox News, they tend to have a fairly conservative audience. So to whom? Or was this a general audience? Was it a specific narrow audience? And then ultimately, what were the final effects of this communication? Again, this is not in-depth. I just want you to learn to start using this simple 5-step process as you're reading things. Who is speaking? What are they saying? What's the channel they chose to use? To whom were they speaking, and what were the ultimate effects of the communication? Again, there's no communication theory that in and of itself is completely perfect. But when we understand all these different theories, then we learn to have a better grasp of communication, and we can learn to be the best communicators that we can be. All right, good job today, crew. Have a good and godly day. For of what lasting value is a good day if it's not also godly? We'll see you.